Hello, it's Robin, the Artsy Bohemian. I'm coming to you from my studio in Los Angeles, California. Today I'm going to show you how to do the painting in an old book. And I'm going to keep it as easy as possible because I know it's intimidating. I'm going to show you 3 types of ways, or kind of hacks actually, to paint, even if you don't know how to draw a stick figure. The first one I'm going to show you is probably the most complicated, or hardest, I guess you could say. The other 2 I'm going to show you, and I'm hoping I can do all this in one video, is with a stencil and then also with the rubber stamp. I'm also going to show you something with carbon paper. So I'm going to go ahead and start. In the last lesson I talked to you about some supplies, so I'll just go over those again. We're going to be using watercolors. And I had put links for these below the last Tuesday tutorial. I'll put them below again. Any watercolor that you like using. I just like these because they're small. They don't take up a lot of space. So these are the Brights from Jane Davenport. And these are the Neutrals paints. Neutral palettes. So we're going to use those. We're going to use an old book. And we're going to use some type of permanent black marker, and preferably it should be fine, very, very fine tip. So Faber-Castell is a little pricey. You can also use a Sharpie. Just make sure it's the ultra fine, and that's just because we're going to be doing real light outlines when we're done doing the painting. Also a pencil of sorts. If you have a mechanical pencil, those are a little bit better because they have a finer point. A regular number 2 pencil will work as well. So we'll go ahead and start. Also some napkins will probably come in handy at some point when we do some, if you get too much paint. Oh, and of course you're going to need a paintbrush. So this is the paintbrush I was talking about. Basically, it, let me just pin this because it keeps popping open. It has water in it so that you don't have to have a bowl of water. And so basically this opens and it, you just fill it with water and then you screw it back on, and this is the paint. The paintbrush. Of course, if you have a favorite watercolor brush that you like using, by all means, go ahead and use that. These were also, I had a link for these in the last video, but again, I will put them down below if this is your first time seeing this. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a really loose face. I kind of already started it, and the trick, for those of you who aren't familiar with drawing, is don't do this. Don't draw like you're going to be writing your name. It puts too much pressure. Put your hand at the back end of the pencil, and we're going to just draw a slight oval. And maybe I'll push this in a little bit so that you can get even a closer up view. So this is, we're going to just be doing a face that's looking straight on, and it's going to be a little bit scribbly. That's okay. And so it's the bottom half of the face, and we're not going to be doing the hair just yet. So typically when you draw a face, if you think of a cross in the middle of the face, where this crosses the vertical line is where you're going to be doing your eyes. So you're going to make 2 oval half moon shapes, 2 little dots for the nose, and then think of a heart shape for the mouth. And it's very loose. Now you could just kind of do this. The thing is, don't overthink it too much too. If you overthink it, then it's not gonna be the same. So after you've made these 2 areas for the eyes, you're going to make a circle here and a circle here, and you've already got the main part of your face. So pat yourself on the back. Now you're going to go right up above the eyes and make her eyebrows on both sides. Just a little kind of scritchy scratchy. Again, it's just a light touch, and then you can do a little cleft down here if you want to. So now if you want to do a little bit more detail, we're going to do her lid on top here. Very light, and that's the basics of the face. Now we're going to take and make the iris inside here, and I'm just going to kind of drop the lid a little bit more by just drawing a line there. Now you can make her serious like this, or you can just make a little tiny lift to her mouth and she's smiling. And then inside of the lips you're going to make a little bird shape, you know, like a bird like that. When when you're a little kid, you used to make seagulls. It's kind of like that. Something that's good to have on hand is called a kneaded eraser, and this helps erase anything that you don't want. The whole goal is to just be loose enough that you don't really need to erase anything. So I'm just gonna kind of do a little, it looks like I'm giving her a little hat here, so maybe that's what I'll do. Just gonna make some ears on the side, and just kind of, again, holding your pencil back here, and we're just giving her some kind of hair. I'm not really sure what it is, but we'll make her neck here and then bring it down. I might put some clothes on her here. Alright, so that's the basics. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and paint very, very, very lightly. After it dries, we'll go back over it with some inks, some ink pens. So I hope you can see that. You can mix your colors right here on the side. This opens up like this. And I think I'm going to do this. Now the great thing about these brushes is that you can grab color and then mix it over on the side here. So it's kind of, let me just push this out a little bit more. See that? You can mix your colors here, and if you have too much, that's what your napkin is for, and you can just take it off. And voila. So we're gonna, I like to start with the lightest colors in the pale tans or yellows, and I'm just going to start where the shadows would be. Now anytime you paint with watercolor, it looks darker when it's wet. When it dries, it's going to be a lot lighter, so don't freak out if it looks too dark. So just follow along what I'm doing. I'm going to do the sides here, and then because we're using the paint, it's going to start getting lighter, so you can start dragging that paint there. I'm going to take a little bit of brown, just a little tiny bit. I'm going to make sure it's not too much. See, it's a little bit too much there. And I'm just going to go back over that. Now, because this is not a true paper that you should be doing watercolor on, you can't load your paper up with a ton of water. So you have to be patient and let things dry in between, or you can take the heat tool and dry it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this water off, and I'm just going to drag some of the color onto her face. And you see that I'm just doing a little quickly. You don't have to color every single part of her face. And then you can kind of drag some of the color on the side here. In fact, I think I'm going to do a little bit on her cheeks here. Maybe a little bit on her lips. And it just takes just the tiniest bit And you can see here that it was a little bit too wet. So I just cleaned off my brush on the towel on the side here, and then picked up the excess. So I'm gonna wait till this dries on her face. I'm not gonna touch anything else on her face. I'm gonna work a little bit on her hair. I might make her hair this color here. And if that's too much, you can just go back, clean off your brush, and then take some of that paint off. Now I think I'm gonna take and maybe add a little bit more hair here. And that almost looks like a veil. I think I'm just going to leave that. It kind of looks like a veil to me, so I'm just going to keep going with that. And it could be that I might be adding some flowers or something in her hair up here in this veil. So I have a little bit of paint still on here, and I'm just keeping everything really, really light. And you can see that I'm not covering every single surface, because all of the places that you miss, that you don't touch with paint, acts as a highlight. So I don't like this real bright yellow color in her hair, so I'm gonna darken it up. And I think what I'll do is I'll go in where I made the marks with my pencil and just kind of do an outline here. And I might do some here. And I'm going to bring some of this down here. So we're almost done. It really doesn't take a lot to produce something like this. I am going to add her face is getting dry, so I'm going to add some more depth to, I'm going to do something on her eyebrows here. And again, it's just the lightest touch with the tip of the brush. And I might do something with her nostrils, very subtle. And I'm going to go into her eyes, outline her eyes. And you can see I haven't added any more paint. I'm just using neutral colors here. But I will go back in. I'm probably going to put some flowers in her hair up here. I'm just going to drag some of this color down and up here. And I'm going to do a little bit up here. And you can squeeze the barrel if you need more water, so that's what I'm doing. I want to give some of a little bit of an outline here. And I'm going to do a little bit more in her cheeks. So by waiting for each layer to dry, you get this wonderful effect. I am going to, now for the lips, I'm going to just add a little color to the top of her lip. And eventually I will be adding highlights to the bottom of her lip with a white pen, and then we'll outline the whole thing when we're done with a fine-tipped black pen. Let's see here. So you can see there's some highlights now because each layer that is dried gives you that wonderful watercolor effect. So I'm going to go, this is about semi-dry, so I'm going to go back in and add some shadow with the darker brown. And you can take some of it off by just wiping your brush on the towel. And you just drag the rest of the color to the other side. So just think of this side as the darker side where the shadow is, and this is where the highlights are here. You don't want to color her whole neck in with that one color. Unless that's the color of her skin, and if so, then you're going to want to make sure that you still have some kind of highlight here. So her skin is a little bit darker tone, which I like, and we're just going to keep going with that. And I'm doing a little bit more shadow on this side here. And I am going to just do a little bit of her clef here. And a little bit more detail on her lids. And her eyes. And all I'm doing is grabbing some paint that's already on the tin here. I'm not dipping it back into the paint tin. And I'm going to add some in here. Okay, so I think I'm going to add some flowers to her hair, and I'm going to just kind of do something like this, little dots and swishes. Got my open bright palette. And I'm kind of feeling like there needs to be more something on up here, so I'm not sure what it is. Remember, she can be whatever you want her to be, so. Now, we're going to be, this might look like a hot mess, but we're going to, like I said, we're going to go back in and we are going to touch things up a little bit with the black felt tip pen. It's going to pull everything together. There's also white on your tin here, and you can add some white in there, drop some highlights. And I think I am going to do something here. I'm gonna add some more flour. And maybe some little bits of green. Now see, what's happening is it's too wet, so I have to wait. See how it's bleeding? Sometimes that's kind of a cool thing, but I don't really want that. And again, it is okay. I'm going to go back in and tighten it all up with the pen, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so I let it dry a little bit because it was getting too wet. You can dry it with a heat tool if you need to. Alright, so yeah, her hair looks like a mess. Looks like she has bedhead, so that's okay. Like I said, we're going to fix that. I'm going to add some more green in here. this will just be some hints of leaves. I think I'm just going to drop some leaves down here. And maybe her eyes are going to be a little green too. And I'm going to add a little bit more detail to her eyelids. Now, if you're shaky, a way to help you with that is to anchor your hand down on the page so that you have a little bit more control. And that does not look good. So I'm going to take some of that off. I just took off the paint and I am just going to kind of smush it in there. Now this is so tiny. This is literally like this book is only 7.5 inches long by 5 inches wide. So she is only about 3.5 inches by 3. So we're working on a very tiny face. So you just have to be really delicate when you're doing this. You just don't want to overdo it. And maybe I'll just kind of do a little bit of turquoise for her dress. Just a hint. And just kind of move it quickly. Don't think about it too much. Think about the times when you were a kid and how you just kind of did stuff. Remember? You didn't think about it too much. I like that. Okay, so now we're going to tighten things up. And you don't have to do this part, but it just kind of brings everything together. If I would have thought about it a little bit more, I kind of started a little bit too quickly. I probably would have set her face up a little bit higher because the words are right there on her nose. So I am going to so this is a nice package. I tend to only use 1 or 2 of these most of the time. I've had them for quite a while. They're India ink, so they're permanent. And I see, which one do I like? I think I like the small tip. Let me just double check. Oh, I think it's good. Okay, so again, the same thing when you first started drawing this lady here. Don't do this. Don't put too much pressure on this. It's very loose. So I'm going to just make sure these parts are dry. I'm just gently outlining. It's a hint of the lines. And this is where you can bring everything together here. And I'm going to do a little bit of scribblies here. And this kind of starts bringing in the shadows. I might go back in with paint after I do this to fix her hair a little bit more. Now when you do get to the eyes, you do have to be a little bit more careful. Just a real light hand. And again, you don't, just kind of do little bits at a time. Don't outline her eyes completely. Do you see that there? Now I'm just going to go back in her where her lips are, just a little tiny bit. Again, little scritchy scratchy marks. And you'll notice, especially on smaller pieces like this, you're not going to make a shape like an eye shape for this style. You could do a little bit underneath here, but typically don't make like an almond shaped eye. And now I'm kind of just doing a little bit more here, and I will be adding highlights with the white pen. And this just, like I said, outlines it a little bit more. So I think I'm gonna try something that I usually don't do. I'm gonna use a thicker and see how that goes. This one is the medium, and so it gives it a different look. Giving a little bit more shape to the flowers up here, and adding a little bit more depth to her shape of her neck and her face. Alright, we're almost done here. So yeah, this is a little bit more bold than I normally do, but I kind of felt like I had to because of her hair. But I like her. I think she came out kind of cute. So I'm going to do a little bit of highlights with the white pen. I guess I'll just grab one here. So these are awesome. Most of you know what these are. This is the Signo Uniball White Gel Marker. They're awesome. I'm just going to take a little bit and just do a dot on her lips to kind of bring the highlights out there. Maybe some in her hair. And if you don't like it, you can just take your finger like I did and Again, it's just kind of a scribbly, more of an intuitive process. And just a dot in the eye. Makes it, kind of draws it out. And maybe a little bit for her nose. So I'm gonna stop here, and I'll show you the other processes for the two other things that I wanted to show you. That's one, and these are the other ones. This one it doesn't look like it was just pencil and watercolor. That one's painted. That's also same process. A very light touch with the ink pen. Also here, mostly pencil and watercolor. And then this is more like what we just did, where there's color and pencil with ink, black ink, and then some white highlights. Let's go back in here. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you was with rubber stamp. I was going to show you, and I still might, but I had done this one with a stencil, and it's a little bit more involved, so it's probably a whole lesson in itself. It took quite a bit of time. I just did this on practice paper, and it was this is the stencil here. So it's kind of the same process like I showed you, except you're outlining the stencil with a pencil, and then you go back in and paint it and then outline it with the pen. So it's quite a bit more involved, as you can see, but I think it came out pretty good. But if you could always do another thing which I wanted to show you, which is and I already started the process, so you can take your your watercolors, and just gently drop color on here, and I'll show you how to do that, and then rubber stamp or stencil something on this. Definitely don't have to have any drawing experience for this technique. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'll just do it on one of these. And also I don't typically do it like on the text. Try to find a page like during, where the chapter starts. And that way it gives you a little bit more, you can see the image that you're going to be painting. There's so many different ways that you can do this too. You could also gesso the covers, the pages, and then that way you have some of the text showing through, and then you can start with a clean slate. But this is just something that you don't have to do a lot of prep work for. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take your paints, and you're going to lay down little fluffy pieces of paint. And so I'm going to start again with the lighter colors, more of the tans and yellows. And you can squeeze the barrel, but don't do it too much because you don't want too much paint or water on here. And it's just very, very light. At least that's how I like to do it. Ooh, that's really dark. I mean, bright. I don't like that. I'm going to take some of that off. You just take all the paint off until it's gone, and then start with another color. And I'm squeezing the barrel just a little bit just to get the color on there. And let's do this here. And it just looks like this really pretty cloud of color once it's dry. And then you just stamp on it with permanent ink and you're done. You can go back in and you know, add some highlights, maybe some ink. But that's the quickest way to get a painterly effect without being a painter. You have to make sure this dries though before you do that. And I'm squeezing the barrel just to move the paint around. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, but I already have one ready to go. So, most of you probably already know this, but if you're going to use permanent ink, you need to get StazOn. It's a solvent ink. It's not like a regular stamping ink that, you know, you can get for rubber stamps. It's for non-porous surfaces typically. I mean, I'm going to use it on paper. You can use it on paper, especially when you're doing watercolor. Even though this is not wet, it's usually a really dark, solid, opaque ink. And then you need a cleaner because it's a solvent based. You need to clean off your rubber stamp with a solvent based cleaner, and there's a StazOn cleaner for that. Another method is using black paint. That's a whole other thing though, with the brayer and all that. So, but we're not going to do that. So if you wanted to, you could take any rubber stamp you want. There's also Jane Davenport has these faces of stamps, so you could use one of those. Maybe I'll do that one. Maybe I'll do one of these here. Yeah, maybe I'll do this one. So you're just gonna, you can use a stamp positioner if you want, but I'm not going to. I mean, it's easier to do it with a mounted stamp already, but I've never even used these, so I'm gonna just try one. So I'm stamping it up. These have no hair, so we'll make some hair or a hat or whatever. And maybe my finger's a little dry, that's okay. I will fill it in with some of the pens. Plus it's not the flattest surface, so. So I just cleaned it off with some of the solvent. And I'm going to go back in and just lightly mark the areas where it should have stamped. Plus this kind of gives you, you know, you have an outline now of where to draw. And this is probably a good way for you to learn how to draw if you don't know how. So voila, you could just leave it like that if you wanted to. I'm gonna just go in and probably add, I'm looking at this and thinking, oh, this looks like hair up here, so I'm just gonna go for it. And just trying to draw where her hair might be. So you see, that's really quick. And you could do this and give her a little bit more of a body. Now I am going in a little bit tighter just to make sure I get these details. Now, if you wanted to, you could go back in and paint a little bit more if you wanted to, but that's kind of a cool line drawing, and you don't need to know how to paint or draw. So you can look at her picture here and see how she drew this, how it was supposed to be intended to look. And I'll just go in and do some highlights here on her eyes. There. Very simple. I'm not going to go too much into this because I know there's some of you who just like something that's simple. I could spend hours doing these types of things, but I'm just going to try to keep it like that. So basically just painting it with some watercolors, letting it dry, and then rubber stamping something on there. And you have an instant base. This ink, I think, is dried out, so I'm just going back over this. And I'm going to add a few little scribblies here. All right, so the next thing I wanted to show you is, oh, this is kind of a cool thing. This will be the last one. Like I said, I won't be doing the stenciling one because it is pretty in-depth. If you want me to show you how to do it, I will. We can do it next week. So I saw somebody do this and I thought it was such a cool idea. Get a magazine and cut out a picture of a thing that you want to trace. We're going to be tracing this gal with some carbon paper onto a surface. I brought this out because it's Victorian Trading Company, in case you guys get these magazines. They have pretty things. So, let's see. That's still a little wet. So what I'll do is, I'll do this. So, if you have a sheet of carbon paper, you can use that, but you could also, and I'm sure most of you junk journal gals have receipt books. You can just use the carbon from the receipt book. What you're going to do is you're going to, I think I'm going to put her here. You'll put her up here. Lay the carbon down and then trace over it. And it's just going to be a loose trace meaning you don't have to get every single detail on her, you know, her eyes and her veil, because again, these are really small, so that's kind of difficult. So you can glue it or tape it down if you want to, but I'm just going to hold it in place. You can take a pen. Let's see, where's my pen that I was going to use? Or a pencil. You don't want it to be too sharp. And you're going to just start outlining this. And you, again, don't think about it too much. I'm outlining her hat and doing a little scribbly where her veil is, going up on the top here. Because we're just going to do an outline. We're going to finish this off. Put where her hair is, maybe this sprig of hair. And just do the basic outline of the eye. You're not going to get real detailed again because it's very small. We do want the outline of her face and her lips and her nose. And I'm going to do some of the squiggly part over here. And her neck. Okay, let's see how this comes out. Oh, looks pretty good. So that's another thing you can do. So let's go back in there. And I'm going to take the fine point and just outline this. You can keep looking at her for reference. Just think about looking at the darker parts of the her face and her hat, and just outline those, because you're gonna go. You can go back in if you want and paint it, or you can just kind of leave this outline. And this is a veil, so it's very light. Got cut off a little bit. You didn't miss much though. So I'm just still going over the outlines a little bit more, and using her picture as reference. And I don't think I'm going to do the veil on her face. I'm just going to keep it like this. By adding these squiggly lines and darkening areas, it gives it just a little bit more depth. So I am just going to add a little bit of paint, and it's kind of similar to what I showed you. Same technique with the paintbrush. And I'm just going to start with a lighter color here. And because the ink is permanent, you can see it doesn't bleed. So it's really important if you're going to do this technique and use watercolor to make sure of that. There's other ways to avoid that with using a medium on top of the paper first, but like I said earlier, this is more about, you know, not just making something quick. This is the quick way to get a kind of painterly. Now what I'm doing is, you can see the hat is black, and I'm making the top of the hat dark, but I don't want to do this part here dark because it would just blend in. So this gives you the illusion of a hat. And I'm not sure if I'm going to add too much color. Kind of liking the way it's just very simple. I might add a little red here. Maybe a little for her cheeks. That's pretty simple, right? And we'll do, I keep having that yellow color. I keep doing that. And that was pretty quick, right? Just take an image and copy it with carbon paper. Just going in with the darker brown to make it look more like hair. Maybe I will add some pink to her lips, tiny, 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 tiny bit. Yeah, that's pretty cool technique. I like that. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it made you see that you can still get a painterly effect without being a painter or a drawer. And like I said, if you do want to have me show you how to do Frida, the stencil, let me know. And thank you everybody for your sweet comments. I am blown away about how many subscribers I'm getting, and Gail Augustinelli was so sweet. She loved the last project I did, and she has a pretty big following, and a lot of people came over, and so it was kind of a nice collaboration without me doing anything. She just kind of was so sweet. She left a link. So thank you so much, Gail, if you're watching. And I will be doing a large giveaway once I reach 10,000 subscribers. It's going to be a nice giveaway. Hoping that'll be happening by the end of the summer. Looks like we're right on track. So I will see you in the next video. And thanks for coming by.